Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. Now, some people may think that meat production is not so much of a political issue. I assure you that it truly is. Many ecologists have pointed out that one of the greatest drivers of climate change is animal agriculture. Meanwhile, for many animal activists, reducing animal agriculture is an ethical concern. Whether you believe in climate change or not, one thing which cannot be denied is that food prices, especially meat, have increased dramatically in recent years, especially this year. The more we do see climate change, the higher prices are going to go. This does not apply only to meat, however. To raise animals for food takes a lot of resources. Those resources include clean water and food which could be produced for direct human consumption. As those resources become more scarce, as they are right now, the price of grain increases. To raise animals for food requires a lot of water and a lot of grain. Meanwhile, mass animal agriculture is extremely damaging to the environment, whether you believe in climate change or not. Have you ever driven past a mass cattle farm and had to roll your windows up because the odor was so toxic? Imagine the runoff from those factory farms reaching waterways like streams, rivers, and lakes. We already know that fertilizer runoff does extreme damage to waterways, killing fish and causing algae overgrowth. We also understand that animal waste is a strong fertilizer. Thus, it takes no stretch of imagination to know that runoff from animal waste is not healthy for the water system. And considering the problems that we've got in many areas with the water supply, you don't want to, contaminate the water supply. That's all without mentioning the extreme amount of methane that animal agriculture produces. Now, I am not going to go into depth about antibiotic use in animal agriculture, which infectious disease experts say may well lead to the development of antibiotic-resistant disease strains. The majority of antibiotics produced in this country are used in animal agriculture. I am not a vegetarian, for full disclosure. I tried that decades ago, and the doctor made it clear my metabolism would not allow it. Technology changes. Today, there are technologies advancing which could be developed for lab-grown meat, which would be far less resource depleting and in many cases may be healthier than mass animal agriculture farming. It would be definitely less damaging to the environment. For this reason, one of my policies would be to invest in further development of laboratory production of meat. I know many people may object to lab-grown meat at first, but if we could reduce factory farming even by a moderate percentage, the potential exists to reduce environmental damage while also reducing food cost, leading to a more stable and prosperous economy in general. If it leads to lower rates of health issues, that would be even better. It would improve health just by virtue of stabilizing the food supply further. Tastes in food change. Beef is a relatively new food source. With cattle ranching being a mostly American creation which arose in the 19th century, in my own lifetime, I have seen soy become common, while soy was relatively rare until my teen years. Cold breakfast cereals did not exist until the late 19th or early 20th century. Human consumption of cow's milk was not really a thing until after the development of refrigeration. The diets in many other countries involve many items not very common in the U.S. In other countries, one may see goat, lamb, even rat meat being consumed on a daily basis. The very first exposure many Americans had to what they consider Mexican food came with the expansion of Taco Bell. Now, say that to most Texans or New Mexicans, and they will definitely laugh at you. Hot dogs, early to mid 20th century. Most lunch meats, late 20th century. They literally did not exist before then. If such technology is developed enough to lead to mass production, this would also create many thousands of living wage jobs. Would there be risks involved? Of course. There are risks involved in all forms of food production and consumption. Contamination would be a distinct possibility. Then again, how many recalls do we see in the meat industry today? One study a few years ago showed that 80% of lunch meats available in grocery stores showed contamination with C. diff. If you watch videos from animal activists online, you would see images of cancerous tumors being cut from animals, then the rest of the meat being packaged. Laboratory meat production, properly inspected, would be far safer than standard meat production. The main consideration for healthy laboratory-grown meat, aside from sanitary practice, would be identifying and isolating healthy cultures from which to begin the production process. This would not be difficult to do. Any possibility of genetic flaws would be quickly identified because the products would be widely available at most grocery stores. That means any and all consumer safety organizations could have the meat tested for genetic defects, among other forms of contamination. That's something I would actually encourage. It's clear that lab-grown meat would be approved of by animal activists. It would mean fewer or no animals would be slaughtered for meat production. Also, for safety, any funding for this research would go exclusively to universities, not corporations. When profits become a consideration, that is when flaws, possibly dangerous flaws, are covered up. This would not be a competition, but a cooperative effort among universities. Products and data would have to be shared between universities and cross-tested at every level. As with many of my other proposals, if adequately developed, the technologies and patents involved would be made available to all potential domestic producers and to all other nations free of charge. This research could also be cooperative with universities in other countries if they are working on the same technologies. Aside from food safety and environmental concerns, laboratory-grown meat has the potential to increase meat production while utilizing fewer agricultural resources. It takes years and a tremendous amount of grain and water to raise pigs and cows for meat, as I've stated. In the laboratory, the nutrients used would go directly toward the meat production with far less waste. This would free up more agricultural production for direct consumption and possibly decrease the cost of meat. It would take far less time to grow something like a roast or entire sheets of meat as opposed to growing an entire animal. It should be clear that what I am proposing does not include cloning sentient animals, but muscle tissue without a consciousness. This would be one aspect of a comprehensive war on hunger and poverty, which my administration would be waging, not just domestically, but globally. The goal is to make food production more stable, more reliable, and the products more affordable on a global scale. Even if technologies are not quickly adopted in other countries, making food production more efficient and proficient would help fight hunger on a global scale and could very well increase international trade. Combine this policy with the ideas outlined in my environmental proposals, and anyone can see that this is a highly comprehensive and progressive approach to food production. Also, environmental protection and economic stability. I am not proposing an immediate cessation of animal agriculture. That would destroy millions of jobs. And without the technology being there to replace it, you just can't do that. My ideas are meant to develop methods and technologies which should continue being developed and expanded over time to replace our current wasteful, damaging food production methods and technologies which are completely unsustainable and to which we must develop better alternatives. This is not a choice but a necessity. We cannot afford to wait until we face a true global famine to develop these things. An additional benefit to this technology is that it would have crossover applications for the growing of human tissue such as skin, internal organs, etc., for medical purposes. In spite of this, I expect that nearly all of these proposals would meet with considerable opposition by existing industries, which would be foolish because some of them could very well benefit by adopting the new technologies developed under these policies. These ideas would have some opposition from more conservative groups, though there is nothing being proposed which would force them to adopt these technologies or consume items produced by these technologies and methods. I completely realize that this is a highly controversial proposal, but a lot of foods we currently eat are artificially grown, isolated from cultures in nature. Some minor examples are yeast and guar gum, which are very common foodstuffs grown in laboratories. The difference is what is being grown. Right now we have to slaughter living, conscious, sentient creatures to harvest food which we call meat. Grow the meat in a laboratory, and we reduce the brutality involved in our food supply. We are currently facing a global food shortage right this minute. To sustain and secure our food supply is going to mandate that the technology used in food production changes. This is going to also mandate that our emotional views on some things change along with the technology. For many millions, these changes will come too late. for those of us who have the privilege of not facing an actual food crisis, we must look to the future and begin the process of making the needed changes before it is too late for all of us. The technologies I suggest may be far preferable to the alternative dietary changes we may have to adapt if we do not make such changes. Such as, do you really want to eat rat meat? Or grasshoppers, earthworms? Would you prefer that? All right. Please share this article or video. Talk about these subjects widely. Sharing my articles or videos may well be more helpful to my campaign than donating money. Though, if you can afford to donate, please do. Right now, it seems very unlikely that I will be able to arrange any rallies, and my public appearances will be few. I would like to change that if it's a possibility. There are definite advantages to public appearances. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good day. Let's talk about these things. I'm all for communication. So, thank you again. Have a good one.